An Honorable Profession is brought to you by OpenCounter.com. OpenCounter builds tools for local governments to deliver permits and licenses online. Their portals make complex permitting simple, which lowers transaction costs, increases transparency, and empowers economic development. OpenCounter is a vital tool for communities big and small across this nation. Check out OpenCounter.com to see what they can do for your community. Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast giving America hope since 2018. I'm your host, Ryan Coonerty. An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. The New Deal is an organization that supports some of the most thoughtful and innovative voices in American politics. I've been a member of New Deal for years, both when I was mayor of Santa Cruz and now as a member of the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors. Check out some of our past episodes with guests like Montgomery Mayor Stephen Reed, Georgia Senator Elena Parent, and Adrian Fontes, the Registrar of Voters in Maricopa County. Each has a unique and powerful perspective on the state of our democracy. It's something you won't hear anywhere else. You can find us at newdealleaders.org or wherever podcasts are found. And if you like what you hear, please tell your friends. We're trying to bring sanity to politics in an insane era. We need all the help we can get. Today I talk with State Senator Chris Harris. He's a Democrat in Trump country where coal is king. He's got a great perspective on how his community's politics are misunderstood and underappreciated by those outside. It's a message many of us coastal Democrats need to hear. He's incredibly bright and committed to the community where he was born and raised. Enjoy our conversation. Kentucky State Representative Chris Harris, welcome to An Honorable Profession. It's great to talk to you today.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. It's great to be here.
So I want to talk a little bit about Kentucky. We just had a big election. You had the nation's eyes upon you. Can you talk a little bit about what it's been like for the last couple years under your previous governor and, what you expect the change to be under the new one?
Well, it's been difficult over the last 4 years serving in Frankfort because we've had a Republican governor, also a Republican House and Senate. So not a whole lot of policies that folks that I represent are benefiting from. So it was great to have an election 2 weeks ago, and we've got a new governor-elect, Andy Beshear, who was formerly the Attorney General of Kentucky. His dad was also the governor of Kentucky before Governor Bevin was. So we're excited about having him come on board. I'm proud to be a part of his transition team.
And can you talk a little bit, I think everyone's trying to look at this race and read the tea leaves for the national election. Are there tea leaves for the national election, or is this a one-off? Like what are the rest of us outside of Kentucky? What are we going to learn? For those listeners at home, Governor Bevin was sort of Trump-like in his sort of mean-spirited attacks on people and sort of extreme policies. And so people are wondering if this portends what will happen in 2020.
Yeah, very similar styles between Governor Bevin and President Trump. Absolutely no reaching across the aisle to the other party or the other people that serve in the legislature. If you're not a part of the Republican Party, just really has no use for you or doesn't want you involved in anything that's going on. So it's been, I think the people of Kentucky saw that was not that was not working for the Commonwealth. And they crossed party lines and voted for a Democrat in a state that has really turned strongly red in the last several years.
Is it a matter of issues for people? Were there certain issues that animated it, or was it really just style and personality?
I think it was mostly style and personality. I'd like to say it was something different, but in this situation, I think that Governor Bevin was one of the most disliked governors in the country, if not the most disliked governor in the country. And he seemed to pick fights with people who remember, teachers particularly, and they said over and over again that they're going to remember in November, and they did remember.
Wow. I want to talk a little bit about your career path. You're a Kentucky native. Your path into public service and why you chose it as a way to spend your time and energy.
Yeah, well, I'm a proud hillbilly, born and raised in the mountains of eastern Kentucky. I'm from the home of the Hatfield and McCoy feud.
Oh, wow.
So I served in local government for a while before I was a state representative, and my claim to fame would have been that I would have presided over the hog trial of the Hatfields and McCoys had it happened during my term of office as the justice of the peace there. But yeah, I graduated from high school, got a job out of high school working underground in a coal mine. Worked there in the summers and on holidays while I was going to school at the University of Kentucky. Graduated from there with an accounting degree, went on to law school. After graduating from law school, came back home to the mountains and started practicing law. After coming back home, I got, I come from a family of that appreciates the value of public service and giving back to your community. My grandfather was in the House of Representatives in West Virginia. He served as a president of his local Kiwanis Club. My dad was president of the local Kiwanis Club. I was president of the local Kiwanis, just giving back. So I was brought up with to appreciate the value of giving back to your community. So decided to get involved in local government when my kids were young. Ran for the office of magistrate in Pike County, which, Pike County is the largest county in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So ran for magistrate and was elected, served there for 12 years on the local government, and built up a good base of people and a reputation of doing things the right way and being honest and transparent in government.
Can you talk a little bit about what the day-to-day life of a county magistrate is?
Yeah.
I don't think that doesn't happen everywhere in the United States, so it'd be interesting. I assume there aren't a lot of hog trials, but what would you do?
Yeah, the judicial powers of the magistrates in Kentucky were taken away, I think, in the late 70s or early 80s, and they introduced district court systems. So actually the justice of the peaces were not holding trials any longer after that. But their main function is to make sure that the county roads are kept up, and they're voting members, just like a city council would be, voting members for county government. So the county government in Kentucky is made up of a county judge, and it's divided up into districts, and each district has its own justice of the peace or magistrate. And so you represent a defined number of people from your area, and they look to you for issues when it comes to roads and bridges and those type things. So very, very the most basic level of government.
Doing the day-to-day work.
That's right, in the trenches.
Okay. And then tell me about running for state office. And for listeners at home, your district. Trump won your district by 50 points.
Yeah.
So this is not just sort of an easy world for Democrats just to walk into. So tell me about the run for state office, and then how do you cover that political ground?
Yeah, well, I come from coal country. We're coal miners. That's the basis, the substance of our economy is really around the mining of coal, and it's not just miners, but it's people that work on the railroad and people that work for supply companies that provide supplies to the mines, hospitals. Everything revolves around the mining of coal. So there has been a very how would you say, movement away from the Democratic Party, at least nationally, because I represent most of the people in my district are registered Democrats, and they became registered Democrats when unions were big. United Mine Workers were much stronger than they are today, but they have that labor background and very blue collar folks. They became Democrats back then, and with the transition away from coal to renewable energy, there's been a lot of comments from national Democrats that have really played against pushed them away from the party, and felt like that the Democrat Party has left them, and they're registered Democrats, like I say. And so I try to make it a point when I get out and I'm talking to people like to you, that these are still good, hardworking, blue-collar people that want to be a part of the Democrat Party. They believe in helping the little guy. They believe in public schools. They believe in that corporations need to pay their fair share. But to some degree, we're leaving those folks behind if we're not providing a transition for them away from coal. So if we're going to close down coal plants and we're going to move away from coal as a natural resource, there has to be a transition plan, a legitimate transition plan in place to help these folks move and transition from a coal economy into something new that's going to provide them a place to work and to support their family in the future, because that's all they want. I mean, they don't love coal. That's how they put food on the table and how they get to Myrtle Beach for a week in the summer and put presents under the tree at Christmas time.
Right. And so that makes a lot of sense. Do you think, because wrapped up in that change is one, change, and people have a hard time with any kind of change, and two, there's a cultural element to it. But do you think if the party came out and said, we are going to invest in coal country, we're going to create jobs, but we are going to move towards renewables, that is welcomed, that is embraced, that there's a path back for the Democrats to reestablish that relationship?
I don't think there's a single coal miner in Appalachia that would not just as soon go to work on a wind farm as a underground 3 miles underground, getting black lung and herniated discs and risking their life every day, if they were able to make the same living that they're making now for their family. And that's the key, is we've got to provide this section of the country, we've got to provide them with reasonable replacement jobs for what we're losing in this transition.
So why has the Democratic Party screwed this up? Because, we should be able to, this is sort of what the party does, is to think about, we're heading in this direction, we're going to invest in workers, we're going to invest in new technologies. What haven't we done, or what haven't we said that gives people confidence that we can move in this direction? Well,
I don't think that there's been that plan laid out for Appalachia. We hear the talk of, we're going to replace these jobs with renewable jobs, but where are those renewable energy jobs going to be? Are they going to be in the West? Are they going to be in the Northeast? Are they going to be in the South? Where are those jobs going to be, and what are they going to pay? And when are they going to come? Because we're worried about putting food on the table for our family next year. My kids are going to school next year. They're going to be in high school, and I got to worry about buying clothes and getting them a car and getting them to, on vacation in the summer. So, as this transition is being made, well, what's there to help us bridge the gap between fossil fuels and renewables?
Makes sense. Can I talk a little bit about last year? You had, and I imagine this very much reflects the will of your constituents, you had been very pro gun rights, and after some school shootings, modified your position, and it got you a lot of attention, both in the state and around the country. Can you talk about that experience?
Well, coming from Eastern Kentucky, I grew up in a family with guns. I've got guns. I still own guns. I have pistols and rifles and shotguns, and I just grown up around it, and I support the Second Amendment. But I also recognize that it is incumbent upon those of us in office to recognize what is happening in our country, and that this scourge or movement of all these different mass shootings that is becoming a bigger problem, and it's growing. And before this happens, at one of my schools in my district, I want to be able to say, hey, I did what I could do to try to turn the needle back the other way. And so while I support the Second Amendment, I also recognize that we need to start changing the momentum of these gun violence, the increase in gun violence. We need to change this momentum. And, I'm in favor of starting off slowly. Let's start slowly and see how we can, curb this trend. And then, we can go step by step. Now, am I for taking everybody's guns? No, I'm not. I'm not for that. Wouldn't support that under any circumstance. But I do believe that we have a duty as elected leaders to recognize this as a serious problem and to address it as best we can. And just sending our thoughts and prayers every time there's a school shooting to parents of dead kids, no, that's not enough. We have to take some action. And I'm fine with starting off slow. Let's start off slow and see what we can do with these just things that most people agree on, like background checks.
And have you found this resonates with your constituents? I mean, when you did this, was there? I know the NRA pushed back hard, but for the folks you represent, were they like, yeah, this is common sense, or is there still uncertainty? It's
been both ways. You have some that fall for the message of the NRA that any restriction on your right to own a weapon is taking away your Second Amendment, and pretty soon we're going to take all your guns. There's that section of the population that believes that and has fallen for that NRA, those talking points. But most thinking people, when you talk to them, do they believe that you ought to be able to stop at a flea market on the side of the road in, Prestonsburg, Kentucky, and buy any kind of weapon that you want without a background check? Most people will say, no, I don't think you ought to be able to do that. Do you think you ought to be able to go to a gun show and buy a gun, an AR-15 or any kind of weapon without any kind of a background check? No, I don't think, you should be able to do that. Well, then we agree that there needs to be some reasonable changes to our gun laws, and let's start slow and try to see what effect that we have. And if we're able to, move the needle back the other way, then we've done something.
So, I mean, as we talk about sustainable energy, as we talk about guns, I think oftentimes the world seems like our country's being divided into the hard right and hard left and blue and red. But you're talking about bridges here. Do you think that these bridges can be built? Are they going to hold? And then is the party, as a national party, doing enough to speak to people in your district?
To answer the second part of your question, I'll say a resounding no. They're not doing enough to speak to people in my district, which is why we're seeing them move from Democrats to voting Republican. That's pretty clear. And the message, their plight is not getting on the national stage. And that's why we're losing them in elections. They're going the other way because they don't feel like the National Democrat Party is speaking to them anymore. And so when Donald Trump says he's going to put coal miners back to work, even though he's not going to be able to do that, and we know that he's not going to be able to do that, even though he says that, he's talking to them, and they have the impression that he's trying to help them. So, I think that we're missing out. The Democrat Party is missing out on a huge opportunity to get the votes of people who are already registered Democrats and have been a part of the Democrat Party, for 5 decades or longer. From the time that unionization occurred in the coal mines, which was in the 30s and 40s. I mean, my great grandfather was I've got his United Mine Workers union card. And on it, it's got dates around the edges for the meetings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just numbered like that. Every single one of those numbers has been punched. So when he came to the meeting, they punched his card, and every one of them is punched. So, union and labor issues are run deep in the mountains of eastern Kentucky, West Virginia, Virginia. And I think that we're missing out on a real opportunity to speak to some folks that are really that want to be Democrats. There's no reason for them to be Republicans.
So moving back, that's good to hear. I think we just got to do it now. Moving back, so tell me about your life as a state legislator. You're in the deep minority parties. So how do you make sure that your constituents' voices are heard? How do you move your legislative priorities? Like, what's it like operating in that environment?
Well, it's difficult to get any legislation passed in the minority, and I think that's the same at any level of government. If you're in the minority, you're not your bills aren't given the same consideration that they would as if you were in the majority party. So you take opportunities to promote your ideas by filing bills and promoting the ideas that you think need to be promoted to the public, and it's a little different process than getting a bill passed and then having it signed by the governor, but you still are able to give a voice to people that are in the minority, and just because our party happens to be in the minority doesn't mean that some issues that we may be talking about or promoting are not issues that our majority, the majority of the people of Kentucky would not believe in. And so, while yes, I think you're right that our country is getting divided into the far left and the far right, there are a good number of us in the middle that if we would, we're the ones that decide elections. The far right is always going to vote one way and the far left is always going to vote one way. But when you persuade those in the middle to go one side or the other, there's where your elections are won and lost. And I truly believe that the next president of the United States is going to have to be a uniter and not a divider.
I hear that. So you've been doing this. You've been in the State House for almost a decade, right? Yes. So being in the minority is not a lot of fun usually. You get to fight your good fight, but it's tough. So how do you stay motivated to keep doing the work and keep doing all the things you got to do to stay elected, attending all the meetings and going back and forth to the Capitol and walking neighborhoods? Well,
just being a voice for people. There's no greater honor that somebody can give to you than to ask you to represent them. And whether that is as an elected official or whether it's as an attorney, it is still a huge honor for some other human being to ask you to be their representative. And so I take that very seriously, and it's an honor to some evenings when you're just coming out of the Capitol and you're walking down those big marble steps and you think that there's 43,000 people back in far eastern Kentucky that are counting on you to speak up for them and to talk about issues that are important to them. And just having the opportunity like this today to reach a crowd of people that will listen to your podcast and hear a story maybe that they hadn't heard before, or look at this issue with coal in maybe a little different way when they consider how it affects the families that have relied on that industry for many years. That is the motivation that keeps me going, and it is an honor to be their representative and to speak for them.
And how far of a drive is it from your house to the Capitol?
Yeah, it's almost 4 hours.
Wow.
So I tell people I live in the last house in Kentucky, which isn't exactly true, but it's very close. So I live, about a mile from the West Virginia border. And somebody told me the other day, well, that's the first house in Kentucky. Daniel Boone came through. He came from the east to the west, so that's the first house in Kentucky. So yeah, I kind of like that better.
So how do you feel? Because you've probably done that drive thousands of times. How do you feel the time when you're going back and forth, What are you doing when you're driving?
Yeah, honestly, I'm talking on the phone most of the time, just to be truthful about it. I do have a book, audio book that I've been listening to, Ulysses Grant's memoirs. I don't know, it just interested me. His career through the
he was
Mexican
an interesting
War.
guy.
Yeah, Mexican War, and then through the Civil War, and then as president, he wrote his memoirs, and I'm sure they're a little slanted to to his benefit, but still very interesting life. And so I've been listening to that recently. But I try to. I don't get bored. I do a lot of now with phone service, even though sometimes it's a little spotty in the mountains. It's still I can work and handle law office things and constituent outreach while I'm traveling back and forth.
And I imagine you've probably found every good spot for every little cafe along the way that you can find there. Yeah. So what's your future? Are you happy at the State House? Are you looking for another office? Like what do you think? What do you think your political future looks like?
Well, I really don't. I don't have any great ambition to I want to be this or I want to be that. I enjoy serving, and the times that I have run for office, it's been because I felt called to do that. I felt like it was a needed thing, and that my community needed me in that way. So I just kind of keep it open, and I don't say I want to be governor someday, or I want to be the president, or I want to be this or that. I just if there's an opportunity for me to do something else that will help my community in a better way, then I'll consider it, and we'll go from there.
And what's your prediction for Kentucky basketball this year?
Oh, I think yesterday I would have told you we're undefeated, but no, we did get beat by Evansville. So Kentucky has they're a very unique basketball system right now, and so every year we're getting 18-year-old kids right out of high school. They're great ball players and the cream of the crop. But it takes them a while to start meshing and to figure out, they come from teams, they're all superstars on their high school teams. And now they're coming and they have to kind of gel and mold and become one. And it takes Coach Cal a few months to get that right mix. But I think he's going to do it, and I'm predicting a national championship then this year.
There you go. And there's probably a lesson in there for the rest of us about the need. Being as great as you are as an individual will only get you so far. It's only when there's a team
that's exactly
that
right.
You get something done.
Exactly.
So maybe we can all learn a little bit of lesson from Kentucky basketball.
Yeah.
Well, Chris Harris, thank you for joining us today. It's been great talking with you, and I wish you. I think getting your voice and your experience out there is something the Democratic Party doesn't do enough of, and so I hope that the party makes room to hear the perspective of you on behalf of your constituents, because I think it's a conversation that a bunch of people have given up on that I don't think we should necessarily yet. I think you've given me a lot of hope.
We're leaving a lot of people behind, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. Who are ready and willing, if asked, to join us.
That's right. They want to be. They want to be. They're working class people, and they want to support other working class people. And the policies that are being passed by the National Republican Party and State Republican Party are not benefiting working class people.
And they see that. They see that they may throw their votes to a Mitch McConnell, but that it's not getting results back home.
Yeah, well, and I think there's other social issues that that come into play significantly, particularly abortion, and I think as time goes by, I think that they are beginning to see that Republicans don't plan on doing anything at the national level to change the Roe versus Wade by virtue of a constitutional amendment or any other law. They just want to use it every election cycle to whip up their base into a frenzy to get out and vote against Democrats, and that's unfortunate. I think as each election cycle that goes by, I think more and more people realize that that's being used as a political weapon by the Republicans, and hopefully we'll continue to see that trend go away.
Wow. I mean, yeah, it seems if that realization occurs, like the two options are, one, they just become so cynical about the whole thing that they just give up on politics and government altogether, or they can be moved into a different party. You know, I think for the sake of the nation, we need to keep people engaged.
Well, I think that's really why you're seeing Donald Trump as the president now. Is people are so fed up with government that they're just ready to blow it all up and say, let's just start over, and you know, it can't be any worse. It can be a lot worse, and you know, government does a lot of great things, and I don't think that people that are ready to do that have really thought through what, you know, how far we've come. And you know, we're the greatest country in the history of the world, and we've built that on a constitution that has served us well. And you know, I'm not ready to throw it away. I'm ready to, you know, roll my sleeves up and let's make it better. And I think that folks, when they have time to sit down and think through it, if they can just get a leader who will bring everyone together and start, you know, giving people hope again in our country instead of being such a partisan, I think that will go a long way. And that works both ways, Democrats and Republicans. You know, Democrats can't be, you know, we can't just be partisan all the time. You know, we have to be able to reach across the aisle.
I hear you. Well, thank you for joining us today. I think it's been a really good conversation that I think needs to happen more often. I really appreciate it. I appreciate both the conversation and your service.
Well, thank you, Ryan. It's always a pleasure to see you, and good to be with you today.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Thanks for listening to An Honorable Profession. Please subscribe to hear more amazing leaders, and keep asking your elected officials to be honorable. Boots Row Group produced this podcast. I'm Ryan Coonerty, and because we keep things honorable, no tax dollars were used in the making of this podcast.